On her wedding day, a child walked towards the ceremony wearing a bomb, and Emma became queen before the vows were cold. Caleb Hale forced Lucian to choose his empire, his wife, or his 8-year-old nephew. For the first time, the most feared man in New York had no clean move. Emma saw the agony in his face and made the choice for him. Go save him, she said, knowing it might cost them everything. But Caleb made one fatal mistake. He thought Emma would collapse without Lucian beside her. Instead, she turned to Vincent in her wedding dress and gave her first order as Mrs. Moretti: "Find Caleb Hale and bring him to me alive." Rain hammered the Manhattan streets like iron shot. Outside the glass tower of Moretti Global Holdings, Emma Whitmore stood frozen, one hand trembling over the bruise hidden beneath heavy makeup. She had become skilled at hiding pain, until her body began telling the truth without permission. High above, Lucian Moretti watched the city with the focus of a man who missed nothing. Know that within 12 hours, Travis Hale would pay for what he had done, and she would be pulled into a choice that could either save her or cost her the little piece she had left. Her heels clicked across the lobby marble, each step sounding like a countdown. In the polished black stone, her reflection looked professional, controlled, and almost invisible, exactly the way she had trained herself to be. The elevator ride to the 42nd floor felt like drowning slowly. For 8 months, Emma kept her head down at Moretti Global Holdings, analyzing financial reports and making herself small. In that world, invisibility had become her shield. Everyone knew the rumors of how Lucian Moretti built his empire on ruthless deals, buried secrets and consequences no one spoke about twice. Emma thought obscurity would protect her, but Travis had shattered that lie. The bruise throbbed as the elevator doors slid open, and she stepped into the executive suite, forcing her breathing to steady. Her assistant manager, David, looks up, his eyes tracking instantly to her swollen jaw. Emma cuts off his concern, claiming she is fine with a voice harder than she intended. She demands the Reynolds file and retreats into her office. The moment the door clicks shut, her hands shake violently. Last night, Travis had cornered her at home, drunk and furious that she had blocked his number 3 weeks ago. When she opened the door to quiet him, his hand went straight to her throat, shoving her against the wall. Emma fought back, but his fist struck her jaw, leaving her world spinning in white light and the copper taste of blood. She had tried to keep everything quiet, hoping silence would end it. But silence had only given Travis more room to hurt her. She woke up on her kitchen floor at 3 a.m, blood in her mouth and terror in her chest. Now trying to focus on financial work, Emma feels the walls closing in. She should report Travis, but his family has wealth and lawyers, while she is nobody. She knew how easily the world blamed victims for staying too long, speaking too late, or how provoking the anger aimed at them. So she hid the bruise and came to work. Suddenly, her phone buzzes with an urgent summons to meet Lucian Moretti in conference room A. Stomach drops. She has never spent more than 30 seconds near him. There was no time to fall apart. She had to move, breathe, and pretend the ground beneath her had not cracked open. Adjusting her collar, she heads to the elevator with her pulse hammering. The 46th floor was silent in a way that felt deliberate, as if even the air knew not to make noise. Emma walked to the conference room, her heels swallowed by the thick carpet. Lucian Moretti stood at the window, his back to her, watching the rain. His charcoal suit sat on him with effortless precision, but there was nothing theatrical about his stillness. When she spoke, her voice sounded too small. He told her to close the door, and the latch clicked like a warning. As he turned, Emma realized his cold gray eyes were already fixed on her bruise. The silence stretched for 5 seconds, then 10 when he told her to come closer. Every instinct told her to be careful, but her feet moved anyway, forward, stopping 6 feet away. But Lucian closed the gap with unsettling calm, caught her chin gently, tilting her face toward the window light. Careful, almost tender, yet his eyes went freezing cold as he asked who had touched her. Emma tried to deflect, but under his stare her defenses began to crack. Confessed that Travis Hale had cornered her the night before. When Lucian asked why she had not called the police, she answered bitterly that Travis had money, lawyers, and a family name. She had none of those. Lucian released her, saying that because she worked for him, she was his responsibility. The words should have angered her. Instead, it made her feel less alone. Emma's pulse hammers so hard she can barely think. Tries to object, but Lucian cuts her off, dialing his phone without breaking eye contact. Orders his associate to gather a complete workup on Travis Hale within 30 minutes. Emma is shocked, protesting that this is not his business. Lucian calmly responds that she made it his business when she walked into his building, carrying the damage another man had left on her. When she insists her apartment is fine, he flatly disagrees, arranging for a security detail to pack her things and move her to a hotel. Tests how quickly he is taking over decisions she has barely made herself, but he looks at her with patience. Emma wanted to reject his orders, but some exhausted part of her was too relieved to argue. He said he was protecting someone under his roof. The certainty in his voice should have frightened Emma, but instead, a strange sense of safety opened inside her. She whispered to ask why he cared, and Lucien reminded her of her interview 8 months ago. He recalled how she had spent 20 minutes explaining how his systems were inefficient, showing him exactly how they were losing millions. She had not been trying to impress him. She only wanted the work done better. He stepped closer, admitting he had noticed her ever since, waiting for her to see her own value. When she called his attention dangerous, she meant every word. But being seen by Lucien did not feel like being hunted by Travis. Lucien admits he does not regret paying attention, because paying attention means he can make sure Travis Hale never comes near her again. When Emma asks what he will do, Lucien asks what she wants him to do, a question that hangs between them, small and dangerous. Emma knows she should tell him to back off, but instead, she whispers that she wants Travis to be afraid. Lucien's eyes sharpen, as if he has been waiting for her to say it. By the time she leaves 20 minutes later, he made 6 quiet, decisive phone calls, mobilizing security, legal teams, and hotels. She feels caught in a riptide, dragged into deep water. Back at her desk, David waits, announcing that Moretti's office has called. Being out of helplessness did not bring calm, pulled her straight into deeper water. They called it a temporary reassignment to direct strategic consulting at the executive level, but corporate euphemisms were rarely just about work, and the kind of help that came with strings. As David offered his hollow congratulations, Emma could only replay how Lucien Moretti had looked at her in the conference room. It was the gaze of a man who had seen the crack beneath a polished surface and refused to look away. When her phone buzzed with a message directing her to a waiting car and a reserved room at the peninsula, she did not fight. She simply sent a text back saying thank you. Standing in the lavish suite above the rain-slicked expanse of Central Park, she told herself this was temporary, but the guard posted outside, the locked door, and the white rose on the table made temporary feel like a lie. In the span of 6 hours, Emma went from hiding a physical bruise to being sheltered by the most powerful and unsettling man in New York. By all accounts of self-preservation, she should have been terrified. Yet, as Lucien's low, steady voice came through the phone, she felt an unsettling wave of relief. He knew she had not eaten, showing an unsettling attention to details most people missed, that should have alarmed her. When she asked about Travis, Lucien revealed his men were following Travis's movements. "He won't bother you again," he promised, his voice dropping into something almost gentle. Promise soothed her more than it should have. That frightened her almost as much as Travis did. Every logical instinct Emma had warned that trusting Lucien Moretti could ruin her, yet when she spoke, she agreed. Resting on the edge of the vast bed, her heart hammered against her ribs. She was placing trust in a man who built empires through secrets, pressure, and favors that never came free. It felt like a locked room with a view. Yet she craved it because the alternative was a constant, exhausting fear. She knew Lucien was not safe. Also knew fear had worn her down, until even shelter with conditions felt like mercy. Boarded the next morning by 2 silent guards, she rode the elevator to the 46th floor, stepping into a world where silence could be more valuable than money. The new corner office was an opulent upgrade, complete with real art and a single white rose sitting in a crystal vase, a beautiful gesture that felt too deliberate to be simple. The illusion of safety shattered when Detective Sarah Chen of the police department called. Travis Hale had been attacked outside his home at 1 a.m., left hospitalized with severe injuries. He claimed Emma had sent her men, a charge Emma frantically denied. The detective knew Emma was at the hotel, but she asked a careful question: did she have a connection to Lucien Moretti? The call ended with Emma staring at the rose on her desk, wondering whether it was a gift, a warning, or both. When the detective pressed Emma on whether her relationship with Lucien was professional or personal, Emma claimed it was strictly business. She defended her safety, revealing that Travis had assaulted her first, offering the photos of her bruises. The detective's tone shifted. Travis had declined to press charges, meaning the case would disappear. She left Emma with a plain warning: men like Lucien Moretti do not offer protection for free. The line went dead. Emma stared at the white rose. Lucien had delivered swift, ruthless justice within 12 hours. By the time the line went dead, Emma understood that Lucien had answered Travis in the only language men like him seemed to understand, and now his answer was tied to her name. Emma knew she should have been horrified, but instead, She felt a sharp, reluctant surge of satisfaction. Travis had hurt her, and now he was paying for it. When Lucien quietly entered her office, dressed in a sharp navy suit, his calm demeanor gave no hint of what he had set in motion. And when Emma confronted him about Travis, he admitted everything without hesitation. He explained with clinical precision that Travis would recover in 6 weeks, but would never forget the warning. When he said she was under his protection, Emma protested, yet the denial sounded weak even to her. Part of her hated him for it. Another part felt safer than she had in months. Lucien stood before her desk, offering no easy excuses for his actions. He challenged Emma to face reality, arguing that the system she believed in regularly failed people without money or influence. "I break laws every day," he murmured, pointing out the hypocrisy of the elite, who hide behind respectability. He wanted Emma to stop pretending to be shocked, naming the relief she was trying to hide when she heard of Travis's fate. As he stepped closer and gently touched her fading bruise, she did not pull away. The admission unsettled her. Still, a quiet part of her could not deny that Travis had finally felt consequences. When Lucien offered to be the man who kept Emma safe, he did not pretend his methods were clean. Her shallow breathing betrayed her turmoil as she murmured that she barely knew him. He did not argue. His thumb traced her cheekbone, a tender gesture from a man who could ruin lives with one call. He noticed what others ignored, and that frightened her almost as much as it steadied her. Standing near him should have made her run. Instead, she felt anchored. When she whispered that this was insane, he placed the choice in her hands. She could walk away, or she could let him teach Travis, and every man like him, what fear felt like. Emma realized with sudden clarity that her choice had begun the moment she wished for Travis to be afraid. When she asked Lucien to kiss her, she accepted what came with him. No easy answers, no pretending his world was clean. Kiss felt like a promise neither of them could take back. For the next 3 weeks, her life was rewritten, one guarded doorway at a time. White roses appeared on her desk, security escorts followed her steps, and her colleagues suddenly treated her with nervous respect. At night, overlooking the glowing city, Lucien showed her what it meant to stand beside a man whose world ran on secrets and impossible bargains. Every new privilege brought comfort, and every comfort came with terms. Lucien initiated Emma into the architecture of his empire, showing her the machinery operating beneath the corporate facade of Moretti Global. She learned of political leverage, deals that were actually warnings, and enforcers disguised as security. He told her that money was only a tool, while real influence came from knowing which threats were theater and which ones were real. When she asked about the glittering skyline, he called himself the shield people feared until they needed it. Weeks ago, she would have called it arrogance. Now she could see the logic. That frightened her most. That hidden world no longer felt like his alone. He promoted her to strategic director, offering an executive seat and real authority. At 28, after only 8 months, Emma called it insane. Yet Lucien saw her intellect as a rare language, sharper than the instincts of his entire board. He insisted the promotion was earned, a public declaration of her worth. People would whisper, of course. They would assume she had risen because of him, not because she had outworked them. Her fear of failure met his blunt promise that if she fell, he would fall with her. Signing the papers, Emma felt proud and terrified in equal measure. Before she could understand what the new title meant, the next step arrived on a Wednesday, sealed inside a quiet black velvet box. Inside the box was a platinum ring, its single diamond gleaming like trapped starfire. When Lucien told her to marry him, it sounded less like a question than a decision he had already survived making. Emma reminded him they had only been together for 3 weeks. But Lucien lived by a different clock. He had wanted her for 8 months. To him, she already shared his life and helped run his empire. Marriage was simply the final seal. She knew the speed was reckless. She knew a wiser woman would ask for time. Yet, wrapped in his absolute certainty, caution faltered. She said yes, and the word left her mouth before fear could stop it. They were to marry in December, barely 3 weeks away. When she questioned the speed, he only adjusted his cuffs and said he would not wait any longer. From that moment on, any threat to her was a threat to his wife, and Lucien protected his wife without hesitation. The certainty should have alarmed her, yet it deepened the strange safety she felt around him. Before he left, his mask slipped. For one brief second, She saw not a ruler, but a man afraid of losing the one thing he had allowed himself to want. He quietly admitted he loved her, standing alone. Emma realized she loved the most dangerous man in New York. Then, 2 weeks before the ceremony, a package arrived. Pale assistant delivers the package, suggesting she open it alone. Within the plain cardboard box lies a frightening gallery of her own life. Hundreds of photographs capturing her most intimate moments over the past 3 months, taken from a distance. There she is walking, dining, even sleeping in her suite, watched by a silent observer. The bottom lies a typed warning: leave Lucien or die beside him in 7 days. Cold reality of the threat makes the room tilt. With numb hands, she dials Lucien, who answers instantly, sensing the danger in her voice. The message was clear. Standing beside Lucien had made her visible, and visibility in his world came with a target on her back. She tells him of the photographs, and his response is immediate, ordering her to lock her door. Moments later, Lucien is in her office, his calm shattered by urgency. He takes the box, his face hardening from urgency into silent fury as he examines the pictures. The sight of the threatening note makes his jaw clench. He orders her to pack her things. She is leaving the city for his secure estate. He brooks no argument, pointing out that this stalker has access, resources, and a plan. Emma hated how quickly her choices disappeared. Yet the photos on the desk proved the danger was already inside her life, watching from angles she had never imagined. With a sudden intensity, Lucien made a call, ordering his associate to investigate a set of surveillance photographs sent to Emma that traced her movements back 3 months. Emma felt a chill as she realized she had been watched long before she met him. Pulled her close, his embrace steady and firm, whispering that he could not bear to lose her, warning that if harm came to her, he would make the city remember why people feared his name. Looking into his eyes, Emma made a choice. She stopped running and agreed to face the danger by his side. For the first time since the package arrived, Emma stopped thinking only about escape and started thinking about how to fight back. When Emma kissed Lucien, the choice became real. She was no longer asking him to hide her from the storm. She was asking him to teach her how to survive inside it. She refused to disappear into another locked room and call it safety. Lucien smiled, recognizing the fierce partner standing in front of him, and began mobilizing the hidden side of his organization. Within 2 hours, his quiet estate became a fortress. Emma watched her future husband strip away the polished corporate mask. He was a strategist now, calculating his next move. Emma was still afraid, but for the first time, fear did not send her running. Lucien stood before her without his tailored jacket, sleeves rolled high, revealing the harder man beneath his polished exterior. Beside him, his head of security, Vincent Calabrese, a hardened veteran whose eyes had seen too much to register shock, spread out the evidence of a deliberate hunt. This was no amateur stalker. For 3 long months, professional teams had tracked Emma, capturing her most private moments, even her sleep, through glass windows. The realization made her stomach turn. Security suddenly felt like a thin word for a much larger lie. They had not been safe. They had simply been watched from better angles. Emma speaks the name that started it all: Travis Hale. Vincent confirms her suspicion by pulling up a heavily encrypted file. After Lucien broke Travis, the young man spent 6 weeks in a hospital. Yet his massive bills, totaling over $300,000, quietly cleared by a family trust. The estranged father, Caleb Hale, a disgraced financier who had vanished after an insider trading scandal 7 years ago, and his sister Vanessa have stepped into the frame. Although they disowned Travis 5 years ago, after a violent incident in Boston, they have returned. The Hale name had come back like a debt collector, bringing every old wound with it. Vanessa's cold, striking face on the screen confirms that the hunt is now a family affair. Vanessa Hale has a sharp, calculated beauty, with eyes that miss nothing. 32 years old, with an elite business degree, she has traded her corporate career to orchestrate a quiet campaign against Emma. Photographs show her stalking Emma across Manhattan. When Lucien warns that this family is seeking complete ruin, Emma refuses to play the victim. Her hands tighten into fists as she demands to stand by his side. He reminds him of his own creed. Power is about facing real threats together, not in isolation. Lucien steps forward, grabbing her face in his hands. For once, she did not ask him to protect her from the truth, asked him to put her beside it. Lucien gently touched Emma's jaw, remembering the trauma she had survived. He warned her that people like the Hales did not play by any civilized rules. Emma answered with a colder truth: neither did he. She demanded that he teach her how to defend herself, not because she wanted violence, but because she was tired of being helpless around it. As her hands gripped his wrists, Lucien looked at her with fear and pride tangled together. He asked if she was ready to see the raw gears of his world, where threats were buried and enemies disappeared. When Vincent left them alone, Lucien kissed her fiercely. His warning was simple. Once she crossed this line, there would be no clean way back. Emma accepts the dangerous path, noting that the world already despises her for marrying him. She might as well give them a real reason. Lucien laughs, a rare and genuine sound, before calling Vincent back into the room to map out the entire Hale family network within 24 hours. But Vincent already has a lead. He reveals that 3 days ago, Caleb Hale funneled $2 million through a shell company to 5 distinct individuals. As the faces appear on screen, Emma instantly recognizes Marcus Chen, a man Lucien fired for embezzlement. The screen filled with old enemies wearing new purpose. Every decision Lucien had buried was clawing its way back into the room. Lucien explains that Chen stole $500,000 before being quietly let go, while the second face, Sarah Voss, was dismissed for creating a toxic work environment. Third target is Daniel Cross, a high-priced corporate spy and blackmailer. As the web widened, the conspiracy became terrifyingly clear. It is not a simple grudge. It is a coordinated network of disgraced insiders armed with intimate knowledge of Lucien's. But Emma realizes they have built an army out of their discarded past. One enemy could be contained. 5 wounded egos, funded by Caleb Hale and fueled by revenge, could burn an empire from the inside. Lucien warned that the Hales intended to strike at their wedding, aiming for maximum public destruction. If they killed Emma, Lucien would either break or strike back so hard it would finally give the law a reason to destroy his empire. Facing this trap, Lucien chose a high-stakes psychological game. He ordered Vincent to fake the cancellation of the wedding, creating the illusion that the threats had driven them apart. By acting weak and afraid, they would force their enemies to get reckless and reveal their entire hand. It was an ugly plan, but effective. Let the enemy taste victory, then watch them expose the hand holding the knife. Lucien stepped closer, his hand cradling her neck like a fragile anchor. They were constructing a theater of mirrors, where truth and deception would blur. To catch Vanessa, they had to stage a convincing collapse of their own. Emma understood the logic instantly. Her reputation would be the first casualty. But Lucien cared nothing for pride, only keeping her alive. As his thumb traced her jaw, he warned her that he must strip away her visible defenses, leaving her exposed to the cold wind of threat. It was a reckless, terrifying gamble. Emma understood the risk. To make the trap work, she had to let every enemy believe Lucien had left her unprotected. In the depths of Lucien's stormy eyes, Emma saw an unyielding devotion and the cost of trusting it, and who would sacrifice almost anything before letting her be harmed. But this time, he was asking her to stand beside him while the plan played out. She whispered her consent, letting him draw her into a tight, protective embrace. For 2 weeks, they would play broken lovers, casting Emma as defenseless bait in a trap built for people who underestimated her. The next morning, the performance began. She arrived at Moretti Global alone, stripped of her shield. As she walked the halls, predatory whispers followed her. Knowing it was theater did not make the humiliation sting less. The lie spread faster than truth ever could. Inside her office, Emma wore a mask of calm, though her heart pounded at every sound outside her door. At 2 p.m, her phone buzzed with an unsaved number, offering false sympathy. It was the first tug on the line, the enemy offering an escape. She responded carefully, playing her part while knowing every word was monitored. They wanted to paint Lucien as beyond saving, using her fear as leverage. The offer sounded like shelter, which made it dangerous. Someone wanted her afraid enough to step into the wrong hands. Trap was set. The anonymous sender demanded a secret modding at a coffee shop on the corner of 5th and 42nd Street at 10 a.m, insisting she come alone. Trembling fingers, Emma signaled Vincent. The response was immediate, instructing her to follow the script. But as night fell, the heavy silence of her empty hotel suite became a quiet torture. Lucien could not come to her. The illusion of their estrangement had to remain absolute. Staring at the glittering Manhattan skyline, she felt the cold tendrils of doubt take root. What if they had underestimated the enemy's hatred? Alone in that suite, Emma discovered how loud fear could become when no one was there to answer it. At midnight, the phone rang, cutting through the dark. Emma answered, only to hear the cold, measured breathing of a woman who introduced herself as Vanessa Hale. A carefully constructed plan began to splinter. Vanessa was supposed to hide behind proxies, yet here she was, reaching out directly, offering help wrapped in a warning. She spoke of her brother, Travis, who was learning to walk again after Lucien had him brutally beaten. Vanessa framed Lucien's vengeance not as justice, but as an inherent cruelty, a darkness that would inevitably turn on Emma herself. It was a calculated psychological strike designed to sow seeds of suspicion. That was what made Vanessa dangerous. She did not lie cleanly. She wrapped each lie around a piece of truth Emma could not ignore. Vanessa's tone shifted, taking on a careful, almost motherly warmth. She warned Emma that love does not change men like Lucien overnight. It merely teaches them how to wear more convincing masks. Offered her a way out, urging her to meet with her associate the next morning, to hear the truth before finalizing her vow to a man surrounded by enemies. When the line went dead, the silence in the room felt heavier. Although this direct contact was part of their calculations, the calm, reasonable delivery of the threat left a cold residue in Emma's heart, made her wonder if the darkness Lucien used to shield her might one day turn against her. Long after the call ended, Vanessa's question stayed with her. If Lucien could destroy for love, what would happen if that love ever turned into anger? Emma immediately reached out to Vincent through the encrypted network, reporting the call. When she confessed her deepening fear, Vincent offered the closest thing he had to comfort. He had served Lucien for 8 years, seen his hardest decisions, and never once seen him look at anyone the way he looked at her. Emma tried to hold on to that, but doubt slipped under the door like smoke. At 9:55 the next morning, she sat in the crowded coffee shop, holding an Americano with both hands. Vincent's team was hidden in plain sight, yet she felt utterly alone. At 10, Sarah Voss slid into the seat opposite her, wearing the smile of someone who had come to rescue a woman she planned to use. The woman across the table was a study in manufactured grace, her expensive style funded by Caleb Hale's treasury of influence. Her smile was a masterclass in counterfeit warmth. "Emma, thank you for meeting me," she said. Emma kept her voice flat, refusing to bite the bait. "You said you could help, but help is rarely free." Sarah leaned closer, claiming she had spent 3 years seeing the side of Moretti Global that never appeared in reports. She painted Lucien as a man with deep pockets and no conscience, sliding a phone across the table. On the screen, grainy surveillance footage showed a man being brutally beaten while Lucien watched in silence. It was Marcus Chen, a man broken not just by a loss of money, but by the sheer, terrifying reach of Lucien's unchecked authority. According to Sarah, paying back the stolen money was never going to buy Marcus his freedom. Lucien had him broken anyway, simply to prove he could, turning a private dispute into a public warning. Emma stared at the screen, her mind racing. Was this real or another illusion designed to crack her resolve? She knew this conversation was a test. "Why are you showing me this?" Emma asked. Sarah's eyes widened with practiced concern as she warned that men like Lucien did not love, they collected and destroyed. She claimed she had been fired for knowing too much, not for harassment as the company rumors claimed. Now 5 of them were waiting quietly, offering Emma a back door out of a life that suddenly felt less like shelter and more like a trap. "We have safe houses, lawyers, a way out," Sarah promised. But Emma let the silence hang, waiting for the hidden price tag. "What do you want in return?" she asked quietly. Sarah's eyes betrayed her excitement. They didn't want to rescue Emma. They wanted to weaponize her. If his own fiancé turned witness, the empire would crumble. Emma took a slow sip of coffee to hide her anger. She wanted to walk away, but the play required patience. Pretending to waver, she demanded time to think. Even as Sarah warned her that the wedding was only 12 days away, after which the legal and emotional trap would snap shut, Emma stood up, her composure holding despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "Don't contact me again," she commanded. "If I decide to run, I'll find you." Emma walked out into the cold air, slipping into a quiet alleyway where her mask could finally fall. Her hands shook as she reached for her phone. But before she could make the call, a black sedan slid to a halt beside her. The door swung open to reveal Vincent. "Get in," he urged. Inside, the tension in the vehicle was thick enough to cut. Vincent praised her performance, then pulled up a tablet recording every word Sarah had spoken. They had their conspiracy charge, but they also had confirmation of something far more troubling. The footage of Marcus Chen was real. Emma stared at the glowing screen, her stomach sinking. Vincent paused before saying Marcus had not been innocent either. "He stole from a pension fund and ruined 30 families, Vincent explained. "Lucien forced him to pay it back, then broke him so he could never do it again." "Was it legal?" "No, that depends on who you ask. For Emma, right and wrong kept dissolving into a dangerous gray. When Vincent asked if she still intended to marry Lucien, she did not answer quickly. She thought of the footage, then of Travis's hand around her throat, then of Lucien, looking at her as if she mattered. Finally, she nodded. For the next 8 days, she played the broken fiancée, staying alone in hotels, and letting the enemy believe her doubt was winning. Every day brought new betrayals wrapped in false concern. Encrypted files arrived from surveillance experts, and old acquaintances cornered her with warnings of Lucien's dark past. Vincent recorded it all, building a trap for their enemies. Yet the performance was eroding Emma from the inside out. For 8 days, she had been cut off from Lucien, surviving only on cold, public text designed to fool their watchers. A quiet doubt began to whisper that maybe he was actually letting her go. On the 9th day, unable to bear the silence, Emma broke. She bypassed security, drove to his estate, and stepped into his study. When he saw her, his cold mask shattered, and she threw herself into his arms, seeking refuge from the storm they had built. "I am so sorry," Lucien murmured, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. He admitted that he had feared she might change her mind, and that the risk had become harder for him to justify with every hour apart. For a moment, the untouchable Lucien Moretti looked almost human. Then his gaze sharpened again. In 3 days, the trap would be ready. The Hale network planned to strike during the wedding ceremony, hiring outside contractors to kidnap Emma and ruin him publicly. Vincent's team would be waiting in the shadows. Once the threat was neutralized, they would disappear forever. He promised her a secure life after this. But Emma heard the tremor beneath the promise. Even Lucien was not certain. Fear did not arrive with a scream, crept in during the silence before the storm. Emma wanted to believe that in 3 days the nightmare would end, and she would finally breathe. Even wrapped in Lucien's arms, an icy dread whispered that disaster was already coiled nearby. On the eve of her wedding, sleep was impossible. Alone in the hotel suite, her mind spun through every weak point in the plan. What if Vincent had missed a blind spot? What if the Hale family had one hidden card left? At 2 a.m, her screen flashed with a text from an unknown number. "Last chance, Emma. Walk away tonight or die tomorrow." When she tried to reach her protectors, the line was dead. Your server denied her entry. Her hands began to tremble as the cold truth settled in. A professional like Vincent does not simply vanish on the eve of a major operation. Nor would Lucien turn a blind eye to her distress. Before she could scream, her door shattered inward. 3 figures in tactical gear invaded her sanctuary. In a blur of violent efficiency, one man smothered her cries while plastic zip ties bit deep into her wrists. She fought with the raw instinct of a trapped animal, kicking and biting. But her resistance was nothing against their training. Within 30 seconds, she was dragged down the service elevator. As they shoved her into the back of a waiting van, a cold realization settled over her. Not waited for tomorrow's grand wedding trap. They had rewritten the board, striking first, while the people sworn to protect her were nowhere to be found. In the suffocating dark of the moving van, every promise of protection felt suddenly fragile. For 47 agonizing minutes, Emma counted heartbeats while the plastic bindings sliced her skin. Blinded by a rough cloth bag, she tried to map the route, cataloging each sharp turn and sudden stop. When the doors finally creaked open, she was dragged into air thick with salt water and industrial rot. She knew the scent. They were near the Hudson River, where old warehouses crumbled into gray water. They forced her down into a cold metal chair, and with a brutal yank, the bag came off. Blinking against the harsh fluorescent glare, she prepared to face whatever waited in the shadows. The space around her was a place left to decay. A cavernous warehouse smelling of rust and stagnant water, where shipping containers loomed like dark metal walls. In the center sat a solitary table and 2 chairs, illuminated by a harsh spotlight, while a dozen silent figures watched from the darkness. Out of those shadows stepped Vanessa Hale. She looked precisely like her pictures. An icy portrait of calculated grace in tailored black pants and a silk blouse. Her blonde hair pulled back so tight it hollowed her cheeks. Her pale blue eyes possessed none of her brother Travis's chaotic rage. Instead, they burned with cold, deliberate intellect. Her voice was disarmingly soft as she spoke. She claimed she was sorry it had to end this way. Emma kept quiet, her mind sifting through useless tactics, knowing her only chance was to buy time. Among people like them, loyalty was never assumed, was tested, priced, and bought, when the offer was high enough. Vanessa leaned in, her smile sharp. She mocked Emma's hope, stating that neither Lucienne nor Vincent were coming to save her. Why? Because 3 hours ago she had paid Vincent Calabrese $5 million to walk away. Emma felt her blood freeze, called it a lie, but Vanessa simply displayed a bank transfer confirmation from 11:47 the previous night. $5 million, deposited into Vincent's offshore account. To erase any lingering doubt, Vanessa played a video. There was Vincent, standing in a dim garage, his voice clear as he agreed to disable the security protocols and pull Emma's guards. The illusion of her safety shattered instantly. On the screen, Vincent's recorded voice issued a final cold warning. If the girl died, the deal was off. The response from his shadow partner was simple. She would live, kept only as leverage. When the screen went black, Emma was left in a silence that felt like betrayal. This was the man who had guarded her, trained her, and looked her in the eye just 3 days ago, telling her to trust the plan. Now he had sold her life for a price tag, she whispered her denial. But Vanessa cut her down with brutal pragmatism, reminding her that mercenaries have no flag except money. Struggling secretly against her plastic bonds, Emma felt the sharp bite of reality as Vanessa defined her ultimate goal: absolute justice for her fallen brother Travis, whose fatal mistakes had set everything that followed in motion. Vanessa did not need chains to shake Emma. She only had to turn Lucienne's protection into something that looked like control. As Vanessa detailed Travis's destruction, she made Lucienne look less like a protector and more like a man who had waited for the perfect moment to play savior. He had not sought justice, she said. He had claimed territory by leaving Travis with lasting damage. He had not defended Emma. He had proved he could be just as cruel as the men he punished. If Lucienne could burn the world for her, Vanessa asked, what would stop him from burning her too? Emma hated that the question landed. The room felt colder as Vanessa pushed the accusation further. Lucienne had watched the danger grow until Emma had nowhere else to run. Vanessa slid the evidence across the table, photographs with cold, digital timestamps that documented a slow-motion collapse. Accusation was precise and cruel. Lucienne had not protected Emma, he had managed her fear. He watched Travis stalk her, watched the threats escalate, and chose inaction as strategy. In his world, Vanessa said, a woman's pain was money. Emma struggled to breathe as the possibility took shape. What if her rescue had been planned before she ever asked for help? The memories she treasured began turning over in her mind, one by one, searching for hidden seams. The speed with which Lucienne moved that morning suddenly looked less like instinct and more like rehearsal. Vanessa exploited Emma's disillusionment with a warmth almost as manipulative as Lucien's cold control. She dissected the illusion of Emma's agency. Lucien Moretti did not love easily, Vanessa said. He evaluated. In his empire, Vanessa claimed, Emma was never a partner, only a highly prized asset whose value lay in her efficiency. When Emma asked why her life mattered to him if she was just a tool, Vanessa answered with the pride of powerful men. To Lucien, her death would not be grief alone. It would be a crack in his armor. Then came the choice: help destroy his empire and flee under a stolen identity, or burn with him in a courtroom. Even Vanessa's escape route came with conditions. Emma was caught in a vice, watching her future collapse in less than half an hour. Vanessa lays out the grim reality of the impending FBI raid, exposing that Vincent, their trusted head of security, was the one who sold them out. The house of cards built on secrets and pressure is finally folding. The federal government has 3 months of untraceable transactions, buried crimes, and illicit deals ready to crush Lucien's empire. And Emma is positioned perfectly to take the fall. The message was brutal. In Lucien's world, safety was not a gift. It came with a bill, and the bill had finally arrived. Emma believed she was safe, but she was only ever a shield placed between Lucien and the consequences coming for him. Denial was the last defense Emma had, and the laptop screen tore through it. The image showed Lucien's fortress being stormed by federal agents, his limitless reach collapsing into handcuffs and flashing lights. His face was a mask of silent rage as the charges appeared. Racketeering, conspiracy, money laundering. The video looked unreal, like a scene from someone else's downfall. But Emma knew exactly whose life was being buried on that screen. Her hands went numb against the restraints. If Lucien sank, Vanessa wanted Emma chained to him when the water closed over. Emma sits in the suffocating silence of the warehouse, her mind struggling to process the sudden collapse of her world. Vanessa slides the cooperation agreement across the scarred wood, a piece of paper that carries the weight of a door closing on her past need to survive. Vanessa's patience was gone. She wanted instinct, panic, a signature made under pressure. As Emma remembers the elaborate traps Lucienne claimed would protect her, she realizes they were all dismantled by a single insider's betrayal. All of Lucienne's walls meant nothing if one trusted man could open the gate from within. Vanessa understood the value of symbols better than Emma wanted to admit. She explains that murdering Emma would only turn Lucienne into a sympathetic martyr, a grieving fiancé whose crimes are washed away by tears of public pity. To have his own fiancée expose him as cruel and corrupt, that was a public destruction of his name. Away his legacy, leaving him naked before the law. Emma refuses. She is warned of the ugly reality of prison, where the associates of powerful men become prime targets. In the quiet warehouse, Emma understood the trap. Vanessa was not offering freedom. She was choosing the shape of Emma's ruin. The dripping water in the shadows marks the last quiet seconds before she had to choose. With no savior coming to rescue her, facing the stark reality of Lucienne's deeds, Emma felt the last soft illusion crack. There were no avenging angels coming to save her. There was only the cold data of a life spent in the service of cruelty. The files on the laptop screen revealed the violence that funded the luxury around her: money laundering, brutal beatings, and bodies buried beneath expensive silence. Seeing it laid out cracked something deep inside her. For the first time, she could not separate the warmth of Lucienne's hand from the blood on it. If she stayed, she would have to know exactly what she was choosing. Desperation had made parts of the story too easy for her to accept. Emma felt this terrifying doubt take root. Had Lucien orchestrated her rescue? Had he allowed Travis to terrorize her, waiting for the perfect psychological moment to swoop in as her savior? Vanessa's words were a slow-acting poison, painting Lucien not as a lover, but as an acquisition specialist who saw Emma as an asset to be collected. Emma wanted to fight the accusation, to cling to the memory of his touch and the safety it offered. Yet, looking back through the cold lens of Lucienne's ruthless history, she couldn't ignore the possibility that her entire romance was a choreographed game. Vanessa granted her 15 minutes to choose her side, leaving her to weigh her memories against her survival, leaving behind something colder and more useful. Emma stared down at the platinum ring on her finger, a promise of forever that now felt like a shackle. Vanessa sneered, asking if a man who truly loved her would ever let her walk into this trap blind. But Emma looked at Vanessa, strategically sympathetic, offering a hand while hiding a knife, and finally saw the board clearly. Lucien had trained her to read pressure, deadlines, and fear. He had also trained her to notice when someone needed her to panic. "You're wrong about one thing," Emma said, her voice steady. "You think he let me walk into this blind. But he didn't." Emma's voice steadied as she faced Vanessa. "Taught me how people like you operate," she said. "You mix truth with lies to create doubt, and you invent urgent deadlines to force bad choices." She saw through the illusion of the quick FBI raid. Threat were real. They would wait until she was helpless, not demand a signature now. They needed her compliance before Lucien arrived to dismantle their game. Vanessa warned her she was making a mistake, but Emma only smiled. Emma had learned enough from Lucien to recognize a forced choice. Whatever happened next, the decision would be hers, not Vanessa's. Even with plastic zip ties biting into her wrists, Emma refused to bend. Bat her defiance at Vanessa, who lost her calm facade and claimed Lucien had been betrayed by Vincent and captured by the authorities. Emma remained unyielding, choosing potential death over betraying the man she loved. As the warehouse lights plunged them into darkness, chaos erupted. She was dragged, hitting the concrete floor hard, unable to break her fall. Gunfire shattered the silence, muzzle flashes strobing against the walls as she scrambled. In that brutal instant, Emma understood what loyalty was choosing who to stand with when the first shock was not the gunfire. It was Vincent's hand appearing in the dark. Bullets sparked off steel. Glass rained down like frozen tears. And he dragged Emma into the shadows with brutal urgency. The man she believed had sold her life for $5 million now cut her free with one sharp motion. Pain rushed back into her hands, burning and electric. The video, the transfer, the betrayal, all of it had been staged to feed Vanessa's arrogance. As red emergency lights flared across the warehouse, the truth snapped into place. Vincent had not betrayed her. He had played the traitor so Vanessa would expose herself. Some men did not enter a room quietly. They changed its temperature the moment they appeared. Lucien came through the chaos like an avenging storm, armored in the calm of a man who had made peace with his own darkness. Yet when his eyes found Emma, his killer focus cracked. For one breath, He looked afraid. He ordered her evacuation. But Emma refused. She was done being moved from room to room for her own good. When Vincent handed her a weapon, she accepted it with both shaking hands. In that instant, she stopped being the prize. Everyone fought over and became a decision no one could control. At the center of the chaos, Lucienne stood before Vanessa with winter-cold calm. Vanessa clung to her paperwork and digital evidence like armor, blind to the fact that every victory she thought she held had been prepared for her. Lucienne's words cut through her panic with quiet precision. Every piece of leverage had been planted, nurtured by a betrayal that never existed. Vanessa's arrogance had done half the work for them. She believed she had outsmarted Lucienne, only to realize she had walked into a trap built to match her exact measurements. When control slipped from Vanessa's hands, she reached for violence. The world slowed for Emma, saw the weapon rise, saw Lucienne turn, saw the thin line between losing him and becoming someone she could not recognize. She fired. The crack of the gun split the warehouse, and Vanessa fell back with a scream. There was no going back after that shot. Lucienne looked at Emma and understood that the woman he loved had crossed a line neither of them could uncross. The gun trembled in her hand, but her eyes did not. She had saved him from the other side of herself. Lucienne looked at her with devastating pride, and the words landed like both praise and warning. Around them, the remains of Vanessa's operation collapsed, leaving Emma standing in the ruins with a smoking gun. She was shaking, not from fear alone, but from the terrible clarity of what she had done. To save the man she loved, she had become dangerous. When Lucienne pulled her to his chest, his relief was almost suffocating. He confessed how terrified he had been when she was taken too early, exposing the fragile humanity beneath his ruthless exterior. Emma did not feel innocent anymore. She felt alive, armed, and terrifyingly awake. Emma admitted the fear she had swallowed in the warehouse, that she had been abandoned to the wolves. Lucienne did not deny the cruelty of it. He needed Vanessa to believe she had won, and he had trusted Emma's spirit to hold under pressure. That trust felt almost as brutal as betrayal. When he said he had never been more proud, she heard the truth beneath it. She had survived the trial he allowed her to face. He called her his equal, a title earned through fear, pain, and the choice not to break. Emma looked at this brilliant, terrifying man and whispered that she hated him. She hated him because she understood him. That scared her most. Lucienne answered with a kiss that felt like drowning. A harsh return to life in the shadow of death. He demanded they marry tomorrow, refusing to let another delay or threat stand between them and the empire they were building. Emma should have objected. She should have demanded time to heal from the psychological warfare that had nearly broken her. Instead, she agreed, but not blindly. She told him this was the last time he used her fear without her consent. Lucienne accepted the boundary without argument. In the blood-soaked warehouse, she was no longer his pupil. She was his equal. And she had just made him hear it. His wicked smile sealed the truth between them. Emma accepted what she had chosen. She loved a man capable of terrible things. Not because she was blind to them, but because she had seen how the world treated the defenseless. During the 3 hours of cleanup, as the security team erased every trace of the confrontation, Emma sat wrapped in his jacket, feeling only exhausted relief. The old life was gone, replaced by the reality of the underworld. She did not feel clean, and she did not feel sorry to be alive. Sitting there with the night still clinging to her hands, Emma felt the strange peace of a woman who had survived by refusing to stay helpless. Tomorrow, Emma would bind her life to the most dangerous man in New York, assuming she survived. When Lucienne slid into the vehicle, his combat gear was gone, though blood still shadowed his knuckles. He noticed her stare and wiped them clean with slow precision. Vincent was handling the authorities, he said quietly. The federal warrants were ready, charging their enemies with kidnapping and attempted murder. Watching the city lights bleed across the glass, Emma asked how he had faked his own arrest. Actors and crews, he replied, taking her hand. In Lucienne's world, the best illusions were built from an enemy's vanity. Vanessa only saw the victory she wanted to believe. And Vincent's betrayal, she asked. Lucienne explained that it had been staged. $5 million of his own money had been moved into Vincent's account, then pulled back 30 seconds later. A brief digital lie, real enough to deceive Vanessa's spies. Lucienne traced quiet circles on Emma's palm as he spoke, but the gentleness did not soften the truth. He had known they would take her before the wedding. He had let her play the bait because the trap required it. Emma studied him in the dim streetlight, seeing the exhaustion under his control. A bitter laugh escaped her. He had manipulated her, left her terrified, and still expected her to understand why. Lucien's voice dropped. You in the dark because Vanessa would have smelled rehearsal on you. He looked away for the first time that night. Your fear had to be real. That is the part I will never forgive myself for. Emma wanted to burn with rage. She wanted to hate him cleanly, without the complication of knowing he was right about Vanessa. He had left her alone in that freezing warehouse, believing she was abandoned, because he trusted her to survive it. Trust felt cruel. It also felt terrifyingly accurate. Pulled her hand from his. I hate that you were right, she whispered. Do not ever make me prove it that way again. Lucien offered a tired, wounded smile. For once, he did not try to defend himself. Emma leaned back against the seat, letting exhaustion take over, and warned that if he ever used her as blind bait again, she would take half his empire in the divorce and burn the other half for spite. His laugh was rare and warm as he kissed her hair. Soon they arrived at the hotel. Armed guards patrolled the hallways outside her suite, a cold insurance policy against future threats. In the elevator, he told her she had 10 hours to sleep. When she asked if he was staying, he shook his head. Loose ends still waited at the estate. Tomorrow she would legally and irrevocably become his wife. Every rival would understand that touching her meant war. Tonight, Lucien was going to make sure no one was foolish enough to try. Emma knew this was not paranoia. It was the price of surviving among people who never stopped calculating. He kissed her with a quiet promise, before vanishing into the night. Left alone with Vincent outside the door, she stood by the window, overlooking the dark expanse of Central Park. Sleep was impossible. In 10 hours she would marry a man who operated like a general, who had tested her with fire, and who expected her to stand beside him armed rather than hide behind him afraid. He loved her with ruthless devotion that bordered on obsession. When her phone buzzed, it was Lucien. He asked if she was nervous. Terrified, she typed back. Good, he replied. It means you are thinking clearly. When he asked if she had regrets, she paused. She remembered the woman she had been 8 months ago, hiding bruises and pretending not to flinch. Now she wore diamonds, knew the weight of a gun, and still felt fear humming beneath her ribs. None, she finally sent. In 10 hours she would become Emma Moretti. Whether that made her safe or doomed, she had already chosen. The wedding waited at a historic estate north of the city. Lucien owned the sprawling 200-acre estate through a quiet web of shell companies. Emma arrived at midday, flanked by 3 heavily armored security vehicles. Beside her sat Vincent, his eyes searching the dark tree lines with the paranoid focus of a veteran survivalist. He assured her that Lucien was already inside, and 30 of their sharpest guards secured the perimeter. No enemy would breach their lines today. Emma nodded silently, her gaze resting on the white silk gown hanging beside her. Grand stone house loomed ahead, catching the cold winter sun. Inside, the staff prepared the grand halls with a quiet, military-like precision for the impending ceremony. Upstairs, in her private suite, Emma's hands trembled as she unzipped her dress bag. A sudden knock made her freeze, but a familiar voice softened her fear. It was her sister, Kate. They had not spoken in 4 months, ever since Kate had called her marriage plans madness. Yet Lucien had quietly reached out, recognizing that even the strongest hearts need family nearby. Kate apologized instantly, and Emma pulled her close, tears cutting through the tension. Yes, it was madness, but she was happy. Together they laughed and shared a brief, fragile peace. For the next 2 hours, Emma let the wars of the underworld fade, choosing to be nothing more than a bride, preparing for her future. She was no longer a chess piece or a weapon, but a woman standing on the edge of a new life. The white silk clung to her beautifully. Kate finished her makeup with soft, subtle strokes, staring into the mirror. Emma saw a stranger, fierce and almost calm. Kate teased that she looked terrifying, and Emma welcomed the description. At 3 in the afternoon, they descended to the glass conservatory. 50 guests sat in silence, drawn from the elite and dangerous circles she now belonged to. Vincent appeared by her side, asking if she was ready. Emma looked once at Kate, once at the closed doors, then nodded. Whatever waited beyond them, she would meet it standing. Emma took Vincent's arm, her smile a shield against the silence left by her own father's cold rejection. Ahead, the heavy doors opened to a world built on unspoken contracts and elegant dread. There he stood at the altar, Lucien, a man who wore power like armor, his gaze locking onto hers with a quiet, suffocating gravity. As she walked down the aisle, the guests watched not a bride, but an initiate joining a dynasty. Emma understood the danger clearly. The walls built to protect her could just as easily become another kind of prison. Still, every step forward pulled her deeper into his world. Word of her survival had already rippled through the underworld like a quiet tremor. She was no longer just the boss's bride. She was an equal who had bled for this crown. When Lucien took her hand, his thumb traced her hammering pulse, his possessive touch a silent promise. Priest's words on love and devotion floated past her like pale imitations of the fierce, jagged reality binding them together. When asked the final question, she stared into the eyes of her protector, her captor, and her mentor. Nothing about them was soft or simple, but the choice was hers. That was why she answered, with two simple words. The trap snapped shut, gilded in platinum and triumph. His kiss sealed her transformation from bystander into someone with a hand in his empire. As they danced under the falling snow, the room applauded the polished lie of their union, pretending not to see the new power rising quietly in their midst. Emma felt no regret, only a cold, quiet clarity. She had walked through the fire and come out changed. Not untouched. Untouchable now. Yes, but not untouched. The woman who had once hidden bruises behind makeup would never return. He whispered of an ending to all their secrets, promising a night where only the two of them existed. But the illusion of safety is a fragile thing, shattered by the single vibration of a phone. The sudden rigidity in Lucien's shoulders signaled the return of the world they tried to shut out. Vincent met them with a grim face, bearing news that chilled her blood. Caleb Hale, the architect of their misery, was free, a $5 million bail paid by a ghost. And now he had vanished into the shadows. Caleb had not run to hide. He had run to prepare one final, bloody answer. 30 minutes of complete silence, a ghost in the machine of New York City, and a voice that sounded like dry leaves scraping against stone. It was Caleb, smooth and terrifyingly calm, offering congratulations like a snake in a garden of white roses. He spoke of ruin, of families shattered, and of a debt that had to be paid in blood. Caleb was not asking for an apology. He wanted flesh, blood, and the pleasure of making Lucien choose. Now, Caleb claimed to hold a weakness Lucien didn't even know he possessed, leaving them with 60 seconds to face a choice they were entirely unprepared to make. Emma's breath caught as she struggled against the heavy fabric of her gown, following Lucien toward the towering glass windows. Outside, the snow fell on an orderly, silent world, but the peace was an illusion. A small, hunched silhouette was staggering across the pristine lawn, moving with a heavy, unnatural rhythm. When the binoculars revealed the truth, her heart stopped. It was a child, a boy of perhaps 8 years, swallowed by an oversized winter coat. Caleb had skipped the armies, the lawyers, and the games. He had found something far worse, an innocent child. In that quiet winter yard, the grand chess match of New York's elite had suddenly dragged a helpless child onto the board. Strapped to the boy's chest was a vest of wires and heavy plastic explosives, a cruel weight for such small shoulders. It was Marco, Lucien's hidden nephew, a child he had kept far from this life, now turned into a ticking instrument of ruin. Phone rang again, Caleb's voice offering an ultimatum wrapped in a countdown. Leave the Empire, walk away from Emma, and disappear forever, or watch the child shatter into pieces. All Lucien's guards, walls, and secrets, Caleb had found the one life he had tried hardest to keep untouched. Lucien had 60 seconds to choose between his crown and a child's breath. 45 seconds remained on a clock, ticking down toward a terrible transformation. If Lucien stayed, his ambition would be paid for in the blood of his own kin, confirming every cruel thing his enemies believed about him. Vincent urged an evacuation, but 30 yards was too close. The blast would consume everyone in the conservatory, including every soul Emma cherished. Lucien stood frozen, his analytical mind desperately running through calculated losses and impossible angles, finding only dead ends. For once, Lucien had no clean move, no hidden card, no easy answer. Every second brought the shivering child closer, turning everything Lucien had built into a price tag hanging from a boy's chest. At 15 seconds, Emma saw the only choice that would leave any part of Lucien human. She looked at the man she loved, the man who had taught her how to survive, and knew what had to be done. Go, she whispered, cradling his face as tears spilled over her cheeks. She was letting him walk away from the Empire, and from her, because saving the boy mattered more than winning. If loving Lucien meant losing everything he had built, she would pay that price before watching him become something even she could not reach. With 5 seconds left, he looked at her with desperate devotion and promised to find her again. I will burn this world down and come back for you, Lucien whispered, before giving her a desperate final 3-second kiss. Then he ran toward his nephew, choosing family over everything else, dropping to his knees before the explosive vest. The line went dead, leaving Emma alone in her wedding dress, her heart breaking. Caleb had made one mistake. He assumed Emma would collapse without Lucien beside her. He had not seen what she had become in the warehouse, or what Lucien had taught her to notice when fear tried to take control. Turning to Vincent, Emma wiped her tears away. She was ready. Emma's voice cut through the room like a scalpel, stripped of all warmth. Find Caleb Hale. I don't care how you do it or what it costs. Bring him to me alive. Vincent, seasoned by decades of violence, froze. Moretti. Her gaze stopped him cold. Vincent, make it clear to everyone. They want to live, they treat me as if I am Lucien. Because while my husband is out there in the snow, kneeling to save a child, I am running this empire. She had been married only 2 hours. Grief had no time to settle. Necessity moved faster, and Emma let it take the lead. Outside, under the harsh glare of floodlights, 8-year-old Marco wept silently. Small frame trembled as Lucien whispered reassurances in Italian, the language of childhood safety. A tongue meant for lullaby, not this kind of terror. Through his earpiece, the bomb tech laid out the cold facts of survival. Red wire connects to the primary trigger, Lucien. There is a secondary one wrong cut, and I know, Lucien interrupted, his voice steady. Not afford a single tremor when the boy's eyes begged for salvation. From the conservatory, Emma watched her husband gamble with guests had fled, but she remained. Emma could have turned away. She did not. Lucien was walking through fire. She would watch every second of it. Vincent reported that they had pinned Caleb Hale to an empty industrial park in Queens. Thermal imaging shows a single heat signature, he muttered. How long to get there? Emma demanded, her eyes hardened into glass. 20 minutes. Make it 15. And Vincent, I want him alive. He needs to see the family he tried to break. Outside, Lucien clipped the red wire. Nothing exploded. But the real test lay ahead, the secondary pressure switch. Stakes were agonizingly intimate. Marco, his sister Elena's boy, whom Lucien had kept hidden in Italy to shield him from this dark world. Almost there, Marco, Lucien murmured, his jaw tight with a lie. Your mother would be so proud. Lucien had hidden Marco across an ocean, and still the boy had ended up in the snow, with death strapped to his chest. Elena had no idea her son was 30 seconds from dying. She is on her way, Lucien lied, his voice gentle but hollow. First, I need you to hold absolutely still. Low, agonizing twist of his wrist, the pressure switch clicked loose. He lifted the heavy vest, handing it to the waiting tech, and the boy collapsed into his arms, weeping. Only now, with the danger past, did Lucien's hands begin to tremble violently. You are safe, he whispered, holding the child. Yet as he looked up toward the conservatory, his eyes met Emma's. In that silent gaze, Emma saw the distance opening between them. Lucien had saved Marco, but the price of that choice now rested on her shoulders. Crossing the Queensboro Bridge, Emma sat in the lead vehicle, having swapped her white wedding dress for heavy tactical gear. Her hair remained pinned in its bridal style, a striking, surreal contrast to the relentless woman this night had forced her to become. Vincent warned her of the risks, ambushes, rigged explosives, the high probability of a trap. I know, Emma replied, her voice cutting through the hum of the engine. If we are going to war, Vincent, call me Emma. Lucien made his choice to save his nephew. I am making mine to eliminate the man who threatened him. She did not want to be hard in this moment. She simply could not afford to be anything else. Caleb Hale does not walk away from this, Emma said, her hands resting calmly in her lap as they arrived at the decaying industrial park. In the heavy darkness, the headlights had struggled to cut through the shadows of rusted warehouses. Single heat signature glowed on the monitor. Before Vincent could stop her, Emma stepped into the freezing air, drawing her weapon with a practiced motion born of Lucien's training. He is expecting my husband, she whispered. When he sees me, he will hesitate. That is our window. Vincent reluctantly agreed, but warned that if things went wrong, she had to run. Emma did not answer. She had not come here to be rescued. They moved inward, Vincent on point, Emma close behind. The unlocked door was an obvious warning, but they pressed on. Inside, the gutted warehouse held only a single chair under the glow of a lantern. There sat Caleb Hale, older and more haggard than his photographs, yet his eyes burned with hatred. Mrs. Moretti, he murmured, I expected your husband. My husband is saving the boy you tried to slaughter, Emma replied, her gun trained on his chest. Caleb offered a thin smile, claiming he wanted Lucien to watch his legacy burn. Emma saw the rot behind his pride. Men like Caleb could lose everything and still call it victory if someone else bled beside them. You think tonight was about simple revenge? Caleb sneered. This was only the opening move. Vincent demanded to know where the rest of his network was. But Caleb only grinned. Scattered. Gone, and I am exactly where I need to be. Emma's instincts flared in sudden panic. Vincent, get everyone out. But before the words could clear her lips, Caleb triggered a detonator. The structural pillars blew, initiating a slow, catastrophic collapse. Vincent threw Emma toward the door with brute force, yelling at her to run. Falling hard, she rolled, got to her feet, and sprinted toward the exit as concrete and steel screamed around her. In those split seconds, Survival became cruel and simple. Run now, grieve later. The warehouse did not merely fall, it imploded, tearing their plan apart with it. Emma crossed the threshold, with only seconds to spare, hitting the earth as the world behind her collapsed in a deafening roar. As debris fell like shattered glass, a heavy silence settled over the wreckage. Coughing, her ears ringing, she screamed Vincent's name into the dark. There was no answer. The security team was gone, buried beneath thousands of tons of concrete. But then, a hand broke through the rubble 20 feet away. Emma pulled Vincent from the earth's suffocating grip, hauling his broken body toward the safety of the SUV just before the last wall fell. She had survived, but the silence behind her did not feel like victory. Vincent sat in the back of the vehicle, his left arm twisted at a sickening angle, his forehead dripping crimson. When he asked about the others, his slurred words carried the weight of what Emma was terrified to say. 4 men were dead after she chose action over caution. She whispered that they were gone, watching Vincent's face hollow with grief. They wanted to believe Caleb Hale was buried beneath that mountain of steel, but men like Caleb had a way of surviving the ruins they created. When Lucien called, Emma confessed her failure, expecting anger, and received only his cold resolve. Her impatience had cost 4 lives. The knowledge sat in her chest like stone. Lucien tried to offer comfort, framing her tragedy as a calculated move in a larger game. Caleb wanted her to chase him, to prove she could be pushed into one reckless move. But no explanation could soften the number of bodies beneath the concrete. The line went dead, leaving Emma on the bumper of the SUV, watching sirens paint the dark in flashes of red and blue. It was her wedding day, a morning that promised a clean slate, now buried under concrete. When Lucien arrived with 20 men in heavy gear, he found his bride covered in dust and blood, her eyes hollowed by grief. For a man who ruled through cold calculation, seeing her like this shattered his composure. The past had followed them here and buried itself under their feet. Lucien closed the distance between them, holding her so tightly that the air left her lungs, repeating his relief into her hair like a prayer he had forgotten how to say. He brushed away her apologies, insisting she had done what he had trained her to do. In his world, losses came with every hard decision, but Emma looked at the shattered concrete and saw human faces, not numbers. As Lucien ordered his team to tear the ruins apart, the excavation began and lasted 4 hours. When they pulled the first 3 bodies from the wreckage, crushed beyond recognition, the reality settled with unbearable weight. Emma could not look away. These were the costs Lucien had learned to count, and she had not. The 4th man died instantly under a support beam. A sudden end to a life spent in dangerous work. Emma forced herself to watch, memorizing their faces, refusing to let their death become anonymous. In the wreckage, however, a strange twist of fate awaited. Beneath the collapse, a hollow cavity had protected Caleb Hale. He was broken and barely conscious, but alive. Lucien stood over him, his eyes carrying a desire for execution, but he handed the final decision to Emma. Looking at the pathetic figure of the man who had tried to ruin her life, Emma expected to feel a burning fury. Instead, she felt only a quiet, exhausting pity. In that moment, Emma understood that vengeance would not heal her. It would only deepen the darkness she had been trying to escape. By turning Caleb over to the law, Emma denied him the martyrdom he wanted, leaving him alive with the knowledge of his complete failure. Lucien watched her, analyzing her restraint before nodding. His team pulled Caleb from the wreckage, handing him to agents waiting in the shadows. As the ambulance drove away, its sirens fading into the pre-dawn quiet, a cold peace settled over Manhattan. The empire Caleb tried to destroy was still standing. And so was Emma. Taking her hand, Lucien led her toward the sanctuary of his penthouse. It was a place built to keep the world out, but now it would be where they would rebuild themselves. Mercy did not make her weak. It made Caleb's defeat colder, lonelier, and final. The dead were sent home in expensive boxes, accompanied by checks that could never replace a father, a brother, or a son, as old alliance fractured across the ocean. Emma stood at the penthouse window. She was still wearing stained tactical gear, looking less like a bride and more like a ghost who had escaped her own grave. Lucien stepped up behind her, holding her silent as the Manhattan sunrise painted the cold skyline in shades of gold and crimson. When she finally spoke, her voice was a hollow whisper, admitting the guilt that sat like lead in her chest. She had made the call, and 4 men had paid the price. No payment, apology, or victory speech could make those deaths feel clean. Lucien turned her to face him, his eyes steady, trying to separate her guilt from the brutality surrounding them. He argued that leadership was not about perfect choices. It was about deciding when every path carried a cost. But Emma refused to let her heart turn to stone. She could carry the burden, she said, but she would never pretend it did not hurt. Lucien's expression softened. He told her that pain was the one thing keeping her from becoming what Caleb had been. If she ever stopped feeling the weight of her choices, he said quietly, that would be when he truly began to fear for her. They lived by rules most people would never see, in rooms where every decision carried a price. Yet, Lucien believed in a code, a set of boundaries that kept them from becoming the worst version of themselves. They did not target children, nor use innocence as shields. Caleb had crossed every line, and in doing so he sealed his own fate. As Emma leaned against Lucien's chest, exhausted by everything the night had taken, she wished for a life of peace. But that quiet world did not exist for them. They only had each other and a life built on loyalty, strict lines and consequences. Those limits were the thin walls keeping their world from becoming nothing but chaos. Back in the safety of their home, Lucien held her tight. You became a Moretti. The moment you chose to stand beside me instead of running, he whispered, kissing her forehead. Emma's throat tightened with guilt. Even when my choices cost people their lives. Especially then, Lucien replied softly. Leadership is never clean, Emma. It is carrying consequences without letting them turn you cruel. Each victory had taken something from them, and tonight they both finally felt the loss. Together in the shower, they let the water wash away the ash and dust, knowing that no amount of warmth could return them to who they had been that morning. They collapsed onto the bed, a vast territory that was now their shared sanctuary, while a cold Manhattan dawn crept over the city. Emma should have been trembling, planning her escape from a life that had just proven how easily it could turn lethal. Instead, wrapped in Lucien's arms, she felt only a quiet, absolute certainty. She was bound to a man who had taught her not to disappear. Peace, for Emma, no longer meant a simple life. It meant not having to face danger alone. I love you, she whispered. Lucien held her tight. I love you too, even when you are terrifying. Especially then, she replied, letting sleep pull her under. Tomorrow would bring the grim work of rebuilding, but for now, they had survived. Tomorrow, she would have to face Elena and explain how Marco had been turned into a weapon. Tomorrow, she would stand before Lucien's organization to prove she belonged beside Lucien. But, tonight, she was simply Emma Moretti alive, shaken, and finally home. 3 weeks later, she stood in the boardroom of Moretti Global, Lucien at her right hand. The room was dead silent as she outlined strict rules to prevent their empire from losing whatever boundaries remained. Emma was not trying to make them gentle. She was making sure they had rules no one could excuse away. We operate in places most people never see, Emma said. But from this point forward, families and children are untouchable. A board member who had been there for 15 years raised his hand. Mrs. Moretti, with respect, that kind of restriction makes us vulnerable. The seasoned board member argued, citing how enemies had used family as a weapon just 3 weeks ago. Emma's eyes grew cold, mirroring the winter outside. She countered, is whether we respond by becoming exactly what they expect, or if we draw lines that prove we are better. I choose the latter. Emma had seen what Caleb's cruelty produced, and she refused to let his methods become their inheritance. Chastened man sat back. When another executive brought up the threat of retaliation from remnants of the Hale network, Emma merely smiled. Let them look, she said. Anyone who comes after us now faces both of us together, and they will quickly learn why that is a mistake they will not repeat. The room understood she was not there as decoration. Lucien stood, commanding the space instantly. Emma is right, he declared. We draw lines, and we ensure what happened 3 weeks ago never repeat. Anyone who objects to this direction can leave now with compensation. Shoes. Silence stretched, heavy and absolute. Nobody dared move. Good, Lucien said coldly. You answer to both of us. Once the executives filed out, Lucien turned to Emma, his eyes bright with pride. You were magnificent. Her laugh was shaky. I was terrified. Good, he murmured, pulling her close. That keeps you sharp. You help decide what we build from here. For the first time, the Empire had 2 architects, and everyone in the room knew it. Equal authority meant equal responsibility, and equal consequences if they failed. Emma looked up at Lucien, this brilliant, relentless man, who had witnessed her deepest vulnerability and chosen to trust her judgment instead of keeping her dependent. He had trusted her to help shape the Empire. I am ready, she said softly. Lucien smiled, kissing her against the backdrop of the sprawling city. In that quiet moment, Emma realized the frightened woman who once hid bruises behind makeup was gone forever. In her place stood someone formidable. She no longer needed to be hidden behind him. She had become someone enemies thought twice before testing. 6 months later, Emma was in her corner office, reviewing reports when her assistant buzzed her. "Your sister is here." Emma looked up, surprised. Kate had always kept her distance from this world. Yet, here she stood, hesitant but hopeful. Emma gestured for her to sit. "What is wrong?" "Nothing," Kate said, twisting her hands. "I just wanted to see how you are doing." "You look different." Emma, harder. "That happens when your wedding day becomes a war zone," Emma replied dryly. Kate flinched, quickly apologizing. But Emma shrugged it off. It was simply her reality now. Emma understood why Kate was staring. The past 6 months had changed the shape of her. Emma leaned back. "What do you really want to know?" Kate, her sister, took a deep breath. "Are you happy?" The question hung in the room as Emma thought of the past 6 months. Emma did not arrive here by accident. She paid for this life with grief, survival, and choices she could never fully wash clean. Quiet funerals, sudden jolts of terror at 3 a.m, when the memory of Marco in that vest stole her breath. These were part of her now. Forged authority in sterile boardrooms, forcing cynical men to yield. And in the quiet nights beside Lucienne, where love and strategy often blurred, peace had not made her soft. It had taught her how not to break. She looked at Kate, her smile small but honest. Her happiness was not simple, but it was real, and it belonged to her. For years, Emma had played the part of someone small, letting men like Travis rewrite her worth. Stepping out of that shadow taught her something painful and freeing. Some cages last only because the person inside has been taught not to stand. Now she woke beside a partner who did not demand her smallness, but trusted her strength. When Kate left with quiet, complicated pride, Emma did not chase validation. She looked at her work, seeing not corporate papers, but the borders of the life she had claimed. She was no longer hiding. When her phone buzzed with Lucienne's playful dinner invitation, she smiled at the rare balance they had found: 2 wounded people, choosing to build instead of destroy. Their text exchange held the weight of everything they had survived. Lucienne was willing to wait, just as he had since she first walked into his world 8 months ago. In the safety of that quiet connection, Emma let her public mask slip, revealing a soft, genuine smile reserved only for him. Met with his easy, protective warmth. Setting the phone down, she gazed at the glittering Manhattan skyline, and remembered the battered woman who had arrived here, wanting only to hide. That version of her was gone. Now she was Emma Moretti, strategic, scarred, and steady enough to know which threats were real and which were only noise. Their love was not easy, but it was chosen every day by 2 people strong enough to hurt each other and disciplined enough not to. Emma understood that some prices were painful, but she would never choose helplessness again. Standing in her corner office, she looked over the city that had once made her feel small, no longer apologizing for the woman she had become. For the first time, she was not invisible. She was seen, respected, and impossible to ignore. Gathered her files and walked to the boardroom, where powerful executives fell silent the moment together with Lucienne, she had built a future on loyalty, strategy, and hard boundaries. The world had never handed her respect. She had finally taken up space, and no one in the room dared ask her to shrink again.